Concussion is brain damage, effects linger for decades for NRL players. Concussion is brain damage, effects linger for decades for NRL players. Ian Roberts is used to hard hits. He reckons he was knocked out or heavily concussed more than a dozen times during his 12-year rugby league career. He suffered his first concussion when he was about 13 years old. But the biggest blow came years after the rugby league legend hung up his boots when he was told he had irreversible brain damage. "It was like being hit by a sledgehammer," Roberts, 52, said. The league hardman was one of 25 former professional rugby league players involved in an Australian study that suggests repeated concussion could have significant, potentially devastating effects on the brain decades later. "People don't realise concussion is brain damage. It's literally causing damage to your brain," Roberts said. The study found the former league players with a history of multiple concussions performed 40 to 50% worse on cognitive testing compared to 25 men who had never had a concussion. It was the first clear evidence that players with a history of concussion experienced significant and lingering deficits to their brain function, said lead researcher and concussion expert Dr. Alan Pearce at Melbourne's La Trobe University. "We cannot discount the fact that a history of not just concussion, but head trauma may have effects years later," Pearce said, noting the observational study was not designed to show a causal link. "It certainly increases the risk of impairment later in life, and we need to increase awareness about this issue." Overall, the sportsman had 20% worse scores in fine motor skills and 15% slower reaction times, found the observational analysis published in the journal Brain Injury. The retired players performed 122% worse in learning and new tasks and 98% worse on working memory tests, both of which were surprising given the league players would have needed to be adept at learning different plays and remember certain changes in opposition strategy and positions on the field. The study also found 71% worse at maintaining concentration and attention, and 76% had abnormal brain responses when they underwent transcranial magnetic stimulation compared to the control group. Pearce said the signs of cognitive and motor impairment may not affect the day-to-day lives of these men in their 40s and 50s, but it could foreshadow more serious cognitive decline later in life. Rugby league immortals and former teammates John Raper and Graham Landlance were both diagnosed with dementia. Raper has spent the past few months in a nursing home and Landlance died in January. Roberts said he first noticed something was wrong about 5 years ago when he couldn't remember his lines during auditions for acting roles in the US. "I never had an issue remembering a page of dialogue, but I started dropping lines or messing them up," he said. The NRL legend has been open about his mental health problems, his family history of mental illness and the stresses of his league lifestyle. He did not suggest concussion was responsible for all his difficulties, but he believed the heavy knocks have taken their toll on his cognition. Roberts, who played for South Sydney, Manly, North Queensland, NSW and Australia during his career, said his experience of multiple concussions was seen as an unavoidable part of the game he loved. "We all thought we were 25, 10-foot and bulletproof," he said. "Young people coming into the sport need to be made aware of the long-term consequences of concussion." The former NRL players included in the study reported having 8 concussions on average during their careers. The most recent was 18 years ago. Many said they were not medically assessed at the time and were generally overlooked by medical personnel unless they were unconscious or had post-traumatic amnesia. The study results bolstered concerns about whether concussion is dealt with appropriately in professional and community sport, Pearce said. In the 80s and 90s, concussion wasn't considered an injury at all. Pearce said players saw it as a badge of honor. In recent years, the NRL had become more cognizant of the harms of head trauma and had introduced stricter sideline assessments by medical personnel to protect players with a suspected concussion. "We need to get that awareness to amateur clubs who don't have the medical teams," he said. In a statement, an NRL spokesperson said the current rules and policies around concussion are as strong as they have ever been. "We'll continue to evolve our protocols based on international best practice. Our aim is also to educate all levels of the rugby league community in the area of concussion." The researchers hoped their findings would lead to further research and rehabilitation strategies for people with concussion in sport and the wider community.